I almost lost my leg after one stupid jump, and the hospital ignored it. The night we went to the lake, it felt like the whole world was half-ass asleep except for us. The air had that late, summer heaviness, warm enough to be comfortable, cool enough to raise goosebumps every now and then when the wind shifted. I remember the way the sky looked, a dull, bruised purple melting into black, with just a thin slice of moon hanging over the tree line like it was eavesdropping on whatever stupid decisions we were about to make. My boyfriend drove, one hand loosely on the wheel, the other tapping his fingers against his thigh in rhythm, with whatever muted song was playing on the radio. The headlights cut through the darkness, turning the road ahead into a kind of tunnel that made everything outside feel unreal. I wasn't drunk yet, but the anticipation of the night tugged a smile onto my face. Being 18 felt like being untouchable, like danger was a thing that happened to other people, in other places. When we pulled into the gravel lot near the lake, the crunch beneath the tires echoed in the quiet. There were maybe 3 other cars there, beat-up things, the kind you knew belonged to kids, not adults. I could see the faint glow of phone flashlights and hear bursts of laughter coming from the dock. Shadows moved against the water like lazy ghosts. Looks like a party, my boyfriend said, grinning at me as if he already knew we were joining them. We walked down the short trail that opened up to the lakefront, and the smell hit me instantly. Wet wood, lake water, that strange mineral scent that seems to cling to freshwater places at night. The dock creaked under our feet as we stepped onto it, worn smooth from years of teenagers doing exactly what we were about to do. There was a group of people about our age clustered near the end of the dock, sitting cross-legged or leaning on their elbows, trading stories and passing around bottles. One of them noticed us and waved us over like we were expected guests. Maybe that's the thing about being young. Everyone feels like a friend until proven otherwise. "Yo, you guys want a drink?" one girl asked, holding out a bottle like it was a peace offering. The circle made room for us. Someone handed me a shot vodka, cheap enough to burn, the kind that smells like lighter fluid and bravado. I tossed it back with the kind of confidence only an 18-year-old can manage. The warmth rushed through me almost immediately, fizzing under my skin. The group was loud, but in that harmless, happy way. Someone played music from a phone speaker, tinny EDM that blended weirdly with the sound of water gently hitting the dock. I felt loose, relaxed, like the night belonged to all of us. The lake itself looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. A perfect sheet of darkness reflecting the sky. "You guys want to get in?" someone shouted, already kicking off their shoes. Before I could even think, half the group was clambering off the dock and into the water. Splashes echoed across the lake. My boyfriend looked back at me with a grin before jumping in, leaving ripples that shimmered under the moonlight. I stayed standing on the dock for a minute, my head a little light from the shots. The wood was cool under my feet. There was something magnetic about the moment. The laughter, the water, the night air pressing against my skin. It made me feel bold in a way that was almost dangerous. I didn't know yet that this night was going to break my body open, change the next few months of my life, and almost take me with it. But as I stood there, watching the water ripple under the moon, all I felt was the thrill of being alive and young and stupid enough to believe nothing truly bad could happen to me. The warmth from the shots hit me faster than I expected. Maybe it was the night air or the way I kept laughing at things that weren't even that funny, but suddenly everything around me had this soft, pleasant blur to it. The dock light, it's mostly just phone flashlights held up by half, drunk hands cast shaky little halos across the water. The beams wobbled every time someone stumbled or gestured too dramatically, and the reflections stretched across the lake like thin silver lines. I remember sitting down at the edge of the dock, my legs dangling off the side, toes just barely brushing the cold surface of the water. The wood beneath me was damp and smelled faintly of algae and old summers. Someone next to me was telling a story about getting chased out of a Walmart parking lot, but I kept drifting in and out of it, my attention pulled in every direction at once. The bottle came back around and I took another shot. This one smoother going down, or maybe I was just too numb to notice the burn anymore. Everything felt funny, even the way the dock swayed gently with each movement. That's the danger of being 18 at night with alcohol. You mistake recklessness for confidence. You mistake invincibility for youth. My boyfriend was already shirtless, tossing his clothes in a little pile on the dock before he slid into the water with barely a splash. "It's nice," he called up, voice echoing across the lake. The other kids followed him. One by one they plopped, dove, jumped, or just stepped into the water. Their arms created arcs of silver droplets under the moonlight. Their laughter bounced around like it was too big for the space we were in. I stood up, probably too fast. The world tilted a little, but I caught myself with a laugh and shook out my shoulders like I was preparing for some kind of heroic stunt. I don't know where the idea came from. Maybe from watching the others jump. Maybe from the alcohol lighting up the part of my brain that normally tells me not to do stupid things. But suddenly it felt like the most natural thing in the world to leap off the edge of the dock. Not just slip in, jump, like I was starring in my own summer movie scene. I backed up a few feet, steadying myself, breathing in the thick night air. A couple of the kids noticed me gearing up, cheering me on as if any of us had the sense to stop me. I cupped my hands around my mouth and called out to my boyfriend, "Hey, is the water deep?" My voice cracked somewhere between excitement and drunken bravado. He turned, treading water, squinting at me from a distance. The music was louder now. Someone had turned it up, the bass vibrating softly through the dock planks. He shouted something back, but the water, the music, the alcohol, the night, everything distorted the sound. What he actually said was, "Not deep," but what I heard might as well have been an angelic chorus confirming my destiny. Deep, deep enough to jump, deep enough to make it cinematic, deep enough to be stupid without consequences. I grinned and shouted back, cool, like I'd gotten exactly the answer I wanted, and honestly, I did. The night felt magical in that dangerous, glitter-coated way that only drunk teenage nights can feel. My pulse was racing, but not in fear, more like adrenaline mixed with alcohol mixed with the thrill of doing something I'd remember forever. I didn't think about physics. I didn't think about depth. I didn't think about the fact that lakes aren't movie sets where the water is always deep and welcoming. I just thought, this will look badass. This will feel amazing. I took a few running steps, the dock thumping under my feet, and without hesitation, without sobriety, without a single rational thought, I launched myself into the air. I didn't know it yet, but that was the exact second everything in my life shifted. The moment stupid became dangerous. The moment fun became a long, painful, nearly deadly lesson. But in the air, in that split second of weightlessness, all I felt was joy. The moment my feet left the dock, the night folded around me like a blanket, cool, weightless, and deceptively calm. For half a second, I felt absolutely untouchable. There's something strange about being midair when you're drunk. The world slows down just enough to make you feel like you're floating, like gravity is taking its sweet time pulling you back. I remember seeing my own shadow stretch across the water like a dark smear. I remember hearing a couple of the kids cheering, their voices warped by distance and alcohol, blending with the thumping bass of the music still playing on someone's phone. My boyfriend was looking up at me from the water, head tipped back, eyes catching the moonlight. I think he realized what I was doing about 1 second too late. The instant my body sliced into the lake, everything changed. Instead of sinking smoothly into cool water like I'd imagined, the impact felt jarring. Wrong. The bottom of the lake caught me almost immediately. My right knee smashed downward with a force that didn't match anything I had planned. It wasn't water I felt. It was earth. Solid, unmoving earth. A shock shot through my leg so violently that it forced the air out of my lungs. I didn't even have time to scream. My brain lagged behind the pain by a good 2 seconds, still trying to make sense of the collision. I forced my eyes open underwater, but everything was dark and murky. I could feel the gritty lake bed under me and a pulse of something hot, wrong, radiating outward from my knee. I reached down instinctively, expecting to feel bruised skin or maybe a cut. I wish that's what I had found. My fingertips didn't touch the outside of my knee. They went into it, into a place where skin was supposed to be closed, into a place where flesh was supposed to be sealed and intact. The feeling was surreal, Slick, soft, warm, a place underneath the surface that I should never have been able to touch. My brain registered it slowly, like it was buffering, and then the horror hit me all at once. My knee was open, wide open, something. Bone, muscle, I still don't know, had split, and I was touching the inside of myself. A spot that should have never seen daylight or lake water. Panic shot through me sharper than the pain. The world above the surface suddenly felt impossibly far away. The darkness wrapped around me like a fist, and for a moment I couldn't move. Alcohol and adrenaline fought inside me, each pulling in different directions. One screamed at me to surface, the other just froze me with shock. I kicked with my good leg and broke the surface in a messy choke of air and lake water. The night seemed louder now, every sound sharp and jagged. The laughter on the dock had stopped. The music felt distant, like it was coming from underwater instead of above. I flipped onto my back instinctively, trying to keep my injured leg from sinking. The sky spun above me, stars blurring with the sting of tears I didn't realize had filled my eyes. My breath came in quick, uneven pulls, each one burning. Help! I yelled, Hospital 911. My voice cracked, desperate and raw. I wasn't trying to hide what had happened. There was no room for embarrassment in this level of panic. The lake suddenly felt enormous, and I felt small. Too small. I heard the sound of water being pushed aside. Fast, frantic strokes. My boyfriend's voice cut through the dark, rough with fear. What happened? What happened? I couldn't explain, not yet. The words wouldn't form. All I could do was float and try not to look at the blood swirling faintly around me. The pain was building now, catching up with everything the adrenaline had been holding off. It crawled up my thigh, pulsing with each heartbeat, each wave. I kept thinking I'd die right there in the lake, that I'd bleed out in dark water, surrounded by strangers and terrible decisions. But he reached me, grabbed my arm, held me up, started pulling me toward the shoreline with urgency I had never seen in him before. The night had flipped from carefree to catastrophic in under 5 seconds, and deep in my chest, a sinking feeling hit me. This wasn't just a bad injury. This was something life-changing, something dangerous, something that wasn't going away tomorrow. The sun was just beginning to stretch its pale light over the alley when I stepped out of the hostel, rubbing the last traces of sleep from my eyes. I wasn't expecting anything. Just another quiet morning, some fresh air, maybe a trip to get tea. My steps were slow, lazy even, until a familiar pair of voices sliced through the stillness, her voice. His voice, at first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, that maybe the memories I had been trying to bury were clawing their way back to the surface, but then I froze completely, because they weren't echoes or hallucinations. They were right there, just a few feet away. I instantly stiffened. There she was, my former friend, standing too close, speaking too softly, her posture too apologetic to be casual. Her hands were clasped in front of her, like she was pleading for something. And beside her, of all people, was my crush, the same guy who used to smile at me in ways that felt full of promise, the same guy I thought saw something in me that others didn't. I could only see them from the side at first. They didn't notice me. They were too busy. Together, my breath caught. I felt a sudden rush of heat flood my face, then drain just as quickly, leaving me cold. I took a step back instinctively, as if my body was trying to protect itself before my mind could even catch up. But curiosity, or maybe pride, pushed me forward just enough to hear their words. "Please, Yar," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just talk to her. She thinks you hate her." Then I saw him, my crush, run his hand through his hair in frustration. "No, I don't hate her," he muttered. "She just blocked me everywhere. What am I supposed to do?" Blocked him everywhere, a punch to the gut. She nodded urgently, stepping closer to him, like she was mediating a fragile peace. I know. That's why I'm telling you all this. You deserve to know the real reason." She lowered her voice, and I leaned in slightly without meaning to. "She blocked you because she loves you," she said. My heart dropped, not because it wasn't true, but because she said it. In that moment, the world blurred around the edges. I wasn't even breathing. Every muscle in my body wanted to move, either run back inside or march forward and interrupt. but instead I stood there, frozen in the doorway like some kind of ghost watching the living. His expression shifted. Shock first, then softness, then guilt. I couldn't fully read it, but the way his shoulders dropped told me everything I needed to know. He cared, maybe more than I ever let myself believe, and then, before I could take in another breath, she grabbed his hand. Not romantically, but still, she held it, like she wanted to steady him, like she had the right to be the bridge between us. My chest tightened sharply. I watched him let her hold his hand, watched her lean closer, as if she was convincing him with her whole body. I didn't hear the rest of their conversation. My pulse was too loud, drowning everything out. All I could do was stare at their hands, intertwined in that dim morning light, and feel something inside me quietly crack. I stepped back against, low, silent, wounded, and slipped into the shadows of the alley unnoticed, but the scene, the moment, the words, they burned into me, and I knew nothing would be the same after that. I don't even remember how I got back inside the hostel. One moment I was standing in the alley, watching them, feeling like the earth had tilted beneath my feet, and the next I was stumbling through the hallway, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The walls around me seemed too bright, too narrow, like they were closing in. Every footstep echoed, bouncing back at me as if mocking the tremble in my steps. I didn't want anyone to see me like this, didn't want to answer questions or pretend I was fine. So I kept my gaze down and my pace quick, brushing past the chatter and morning noises until I reached my room. As soon as the door clicked shut behind me, the silence hit, a heavy, suffocating silence that felt like a weight pressing against my chest. I leaned back against the door, gripping the handle behind me as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. My hands were shaking. My legs felt weak, almost foreign, like they weren't sure whether to collapse or run again. And then the first tear slipped out, invited but unstoppable. Before I could even wipe it away, the rest followed. My whole body sank down, sliding against the door until I was sitting on the cold floor with my knees pulled up to my chest. I buried my face in my arms, and the sobs came fast. Raw, sharp, unfiltered. It felt like everything I'd been holding back for months was ripping through me all at once. I didn't cry quietly. I cried like someone who had finally lost the battle they'd been fighting alone. My breath kept catching in my throat, choking on the mix of disbelief and heartbreak. My mind replayed the scene I had just witnessed on a cruel loop. Their hands intertwined, her soft voice, his frustrated sighs. Each memory hit like a new wave, pushing me deeper into the ache in my chest. Why? I whispered into my arms, though the word barely made a sound. Why her? Why now? Why did it hurt so much to see them together like that? I pressed the heels of my palms against my eyes, trying to force the images away, but the harder I tried, the clearer they became. Her face earnest, convincing, his face confused, conflicted, softened by the truth she gave him. And those hands, God, those hands, that one simple gesture was enough to undo me completely. The room felt too small, too quiet, too aware of my pain. I pushed myself up just enough to crawl to the bed, dragging the blanket around me like armor. I buried my face in the pillow and cried into it, letting the soft fabric absorb everything I couldn't say out loud. My chest ached, my head pounded, and my throat felt raw from the sobbing. I didn't know how long I stayed like that, curled up, shaking, clutching the blanket as if it could protect me from reality. The sun rose higher outside, shadows shifting across the room, but I remained still, lost in the hollow ache that had settled deep inside me. Everything felt unfair, everything felt personal, everything felt like betrayal. Even if it wasn't, what hurt the most wasn't just seeing them together. It wasn't even that she told him how I felt. It was the sudden realization that he cared. Just enough to be hurt, but not enough to come find me first. My heart clenched at the thought. I wiped my face with trembling fingers, taking a shaky breath. I shouldn't feel like this. I told myself, though the words felt fragile and unconvincing. I shouldn't, but I do. The room stayed silent, offering no comfort. So I stayed wrapped in my blanket, letting the pain move through me in slow, heavy waves, knowing this moment would stay with me far longer than I wanted it to. By the time I finally left my room, the hostel felt different, like the air itself was heavier, thicker, harder to breathe. Maybe it was just me, maybe everything inside me had shifted, and the world was simply reflecting it back. My eyes were still puffy, and my throat burned from all the crying, but I forced myself downstairs anyway. I needed air, I needed space, and I definitely needed to avoid looking like I'd fallen apart behind a closed door. The staircase creaked under my weight as I made my way down. My footsteps felt slow, like I was wading through wet sand, dragging the weight of everything unspoken behind me. When I stepped into the common area, the usual noise and movement hit me all at once: laughter, conversations, chairs scraping against the floor, people living their normal moments, completely unaware of the storm twisting inside my chest. And then I saw him. He was sitting on the far couch, elbows on his knees, head bowed. His posture was tight, tense, like someone who'd been carrying a conversation inside his mind for too long. The moment he lifted his head, our eyes met. Something flickered in his expression. Concern, relief, guilt. I wasn't sure. All I knew was that my stomach twisted painfully the instant his face softened at the sight of me. He stood up slowly, almost cautiously, like he wasn't sure if approaching me was the right thing to do, or if he even had the right to. I swallowed hard and looked away, pretending to focus on the window across the room. The last thing I wanted was to fall apart again, not here, not in front of him. I walked past him without a word, heading toward the door that led outside. I heard his footsteps follow, quick but hesitant. "Hey," he said quietly. I didn't turn around. I pushed the door open and stepped outside, letting the cooler air hit my face. It felt grounding, until he followed me out and closed the door behind us. We stood there in a strange silence, the kind charged enough to be felt physically. I crossed my arms over my chest, not because I was cold, but because I didn't know what else to do with myself. He took a small step closer. "Are you okay?" That wordo. Kate almost made me laugh or cry or both. "I'm fine," I said, my voice low, thin, unconvincing. He looked down at his hands, rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he was nervous. "I heard you left earlier. I didn't know if something happened or if nothing happened. I cut in a little too quickly." His eyes lifted, searching my face for the truth I wasn't giving him. The weight of his gaze made my chest tighten, so I turned away again and stared out at the quiet walkway stretching beyond the hostel. Leaves rustled softly in the breeze. A stray cat wandered past. Everything looked peaceful, indifferent, like the world didn't care that my insides were in ruins. I talked to her, he said gently, stepping closer. She told me things. My heart clenched so sharply it felt physical. "Yeah," I whispered, "I figured." "She said you, please don't," I murmured, shaking my head. He stopped, the air shifted again. I could feel the questions forming in his mind, the confusion, the emotions he wasn't sure how to express, and I hated that this moment felt fragile, like anything either of us said could break it beyond repair. "I just wanted to understand," he said softly. "I didn't mean for things to feel weird between us." I nodded, though my throat was too tight to speak. He hesitated, then added, "Can we talk? Just walk somewhere for a bit." I hesitated, fighting the part of me that desperately wanted to say yes and the part that needed to protect what little was left of my pride. But when he looked at me, really looked, I felt my resistance falter. "Yeah," I finally whispered, "okay." And so we began walking, slowly, quietly, side by side. Two people carrying too many truths, too many feelings, and no idea what would happen next. We walked without speaking at first. The night air felt cooler now, brushing against my skin like a reminder that I was still alive, still here, even if I didn't feel fully present. Streetlights stretched ahead of us in long, golden lines, each one casting a soft glow onto the pavement. Our shadows walked beside us, long, distorted versions of ourselves, always touching even when we weren't. I kept my eyes fixed on the ground. It felt safer. If I looked at him too long, I knew everything inside me would spill over again. He walked a little behind me at first, matching my pace, but giving me space. That small distance between us carried so much meaning. Unsure, careful, almost apologetic. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. I didn't know you felt that way. I stopped walking, not abruptly, just enough for him to notice. The words hit me harder than I expected, even though I knew they were coming. I know you didn't, I said quietly. He stepped closer, just enough to stand beside me instead of behind me. Why didn't you tell me? I let out a shaky breath, a humorless laugh escaping before I could stop it, because I didn't want to ruin things. He looked confused. Ruin what? Us, I whispered, finally meeting his eyes. Whatever this was. I don't know. He looked down, like he didn't know how to hold the weight of my words. We started walking again, slower this time, like the world had shifted into something heavier. We eventually reached a small patch of grass near a bench under a dim street lamp. It was quiet, only the sound of distant traffic and crickets somewhere in the darkness. He nodded toward the bench. Can we sit? I hesitated, then sat on the far left side. He lowered himself onto the right, leaving space between us. But not much, just enough to keep things from feeling dangerous, just enough to keep things from feeling safe. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke softly. She told me everything. How you've been feeling, how long. I tensed, yeah, I didn't expect her to. She thought I deserved to know. I swallowed hard, maybe, or maybe some things were better left alone. He shook his head almost instantly. No, not this. When I didn't respond, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice cracked slightly. I hate that you were hurting. I hate that I didn't notice. I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't your fault. Maybe not, but it doesn't make it feel any better. The silence thickened between us, the kind that sits in your chest and makes your heartbeat feel too loud. I care about you, he said. The words hit me like a punch, soft but devastating. I stared at the ground, blinking fast. Don't say that just because you feel guilty. He turned toward me, his knee brushing mine for a second before he pulled it back. I'm not saying it out of guilt. I'm saying it because it's true. I felt my breath catch, but he added quietly, I didn't know you wanted more. That sting hit deep, a quiet tearing inside my chest. I didn't expect anything from you, I said, my voice trembling despite my best effort. I just needed to feel something, and you were the only thing that felt real. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping. I wish you had told me. Maybe things would have been different. Maybe I would have understood sooner. Would it have changed anything? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His silence was my answer. A soft ache spread through me, painful but strangely calm. The truth was finally out, hanging between us like a fragile lantern we were both trying not to drop. I didn't want to lose you, I whispered. You're not losing me, he said, his voice firm for the first time. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I nodded, even though the words hurt more than they healed. Sometimes staying felt harder than leaving. But as we sat there under the street lamp, two people trying, failing, wanting, the night held us gently, letting the unspoken things settle in the cool air around us, and for the first time in a long while. I let myself breathe. We walked back toward the hostel in a strange quiet that didn't feel awkward. Just heavy, like both of us were carrying something delicate, and neither of us knew how to set it down without breaking it. The street lamps flickered behind us, our shadows stretching and shrinking along the pavement as if they weren't quite sure who they belonged to. By the time the building came back into view, my chest felt tight in a way I couldn't fully understand. Not painful, exactly, but full. Too full. He held the door open for me, a small gesture. But after everything that had just spilled between us, it felt different, like it meant something now, or maybe like I wanted it to. The door clicked softly shut behind us, muffling the outside world. Inside, the corridor glowed with warm, muted light. The quiet was deeper here, calmer, almost intimate. I stood at the bottom of the staircase, staring up like it was a mountain I wasn't sure I was ready to climb. You okay to go up? He asked. His voice was soft, careful. Yeah, I whispered, though part of me wanted to say no, not because I needed help with the stairs, but because I wasn't ready for this moment to end. We climbed slowly, step by step. Each creak of the wood felt like a tiny announcement of our presence. He stayed just behind me, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, the awareness of him. When we reached my door, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the handle, but my feet refused to move. Something about turning that knob felt too final, like shutting a curtain on everything we'd just unearthed. He noticed, of course he noticed. You don't have to go inside yet, he said gently. I turned to look at him, and the expression on his face made something inside me loosen. He wasn't confused anymore. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was presentactually present, with this softness in his eyes I didn't remember seeing before. "I'm just tired," I said. It wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't the truth. He nodded, stepping a little closer. Not enough to cross any lines, but enough to erase the emotional distance that had been between us for too long. Today was a lot, he murmured. I let out a breath that trembled on the way out. Yeah. He searched my face like he was trying to understand something I wasn't saying. "I don't want you to feel alone in this." The words almost undid me. I'm used to being alone in things. I whispered before I could stop myself. His eyebrows pulled together, not dramatically, just enough to show it hit him. "You don't have to be." My throat tightened. My heartbeat thudded loudly, each pulse heavy and aching. I looked down at my hands, then back up at him. "You don't owe me anything," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm here." Something in me cracked, finally, softly. The pressure behind my eyes built again, but this time the tears didn't fall out of hurt. They fell because someone finally saw me, really saw me, and didn't turn away. A silence settled between us, gentle, full, not empty like before. Then he spoke again, softer than ever. "Can I give you a hug?" My breath caught. I nodded. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, and wrapped his arms around me. Not tight, not hesitant, just warm, honest. His chin rested lightly against my shoulder, and I felt my body melt into his without thinking. The tension I'd been holding for days, weeks, months, slipped away like water draining from cupped hands. For the first time in a long time, I let myself lean on someone, just for a moment. When he finally pulled back, he brushed a thumb under my eye where a tear had escaped. His touch was featherlight, almost tentative. "Get some rest," he whispered. I nodded again, unable to trust my voice. Then I opened my door, stepped inside, and closed it gently behind me. The latch clicked softly, like a sigh. I leaned back against the door, my heart still trembling. And for the first time that night, I didn't cry from pain. I cried because something in me had shifted. Quietly, irrevocably, the moment his footsteps faded down the hallway, the silence in my room seemed to expand, stretching out in long, slow waves that wrapped around me. I stayed with my back pressed to the door for a moment, breathing in shallow, uneven pulls. It was like my body didn't quite know what to do with itself after everything that had happened. After everything I had admitted. "After everything," he said. The dim light from the lamp on the desk cast soft shadows across the room, making everything look hazy, like the edges of reality had softened. My throat still felt thick, my pulse fluttering somewhere between exhaustion and leftover adrenaline. I pushed myself away from the door and walked toward the bed, each step feeling heavier than the last. As soon as I sat down, the mattress dipped under my weight, and I felt the earlier pressure settle back on my chest. Not painful, but tight, like too many thoughts were trying to fit inside me at once. I pulled my blanket around me and sat cross-legged, staring at the floor. My room looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but I didn't feel the same. Earlier, I'd cried until my whole body shook. Now, I was too tired to even understand what I was feeling. I leaned back against the headboard and closed my eyes, letting the cool air brush against my damp cheeks. For a moment, all I could feel was the ghost of his arms around me, the warmth of that hug, the steadiness of it. How something so simple felt like the first anchor I'd had in months. It scared me. It comforted me. I didn't know which feeling was stronger. When I finally opened my eyes, everything felt quieter inside my head. But quieter didn't mean calmer. It felt like walking through the aftermath of a storm. Branches everywhere, debris scattered, the air heavy with things that needed to be picked up and sorted through. I pulled my knees up to my chest and rested my forehead on them. I replayed his words again and again, each time hearing something different in them. "I care about you." The way he said it wasn't empty, it wasn't accidental, it wasn't pity, but then, I didn't know you wanted more. That one stung in a place I didn't know how to reach. I sighed, rubbing my palms over my face. What did I expect to happen tonight? Some big confession, some perfect moment where everything finally aligned, and he said exactly what I'd been aching to hear. Life wasn't a movie, and I wasn't the kind of girl who got the easy ending. My phone buzzed suddenly, jolting me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. A message from him. Just one line. "If you need anything, I'm awake." My heart tightened, soft and painful all at once. I stared at the words for a long moment before locking the screen and setting the phone face down beside me. I couldn't deal with more tonight, not when my mind felt like a fragile glass that one more touch might shatter. I laid back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, the light from the lamp catching tiny dust particles floating in the air. Everything felt surreal, like this wasn't my room, wasn't my night, wasn't my life. I turned onto my side and pulled the blanket close, letting my breathing slow, letting my body sink into the mattress. My eyes began to sting again, but the tears didn't fall this time. Not fully. They hovered there, caught between relief and heartbreak. Eventually, I whispered to the empty room, "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel." The silence didn't answer, but the weight in my chest shifted, just slightly, not gone, but not crushing me anymore either. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in days, sleep didn't feel like something I had to fight my way into. Just something I quietly slipped under, like the last dimming of a streetlight at dawn. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even pretend to. I just sat there in the dim glow of my room, the same chair where I'd wasted months thinking about her, hating her, missing her, cursing myself for missing her. The laptop in front of me had gone black a long time ago, the screen timing out, leaving nothing but my own faint reflection staring back at me, and God, how tired that reflection looked. Eyes hollow, expression drained, like someone who had finally reached the end of a road he never wanted to walk in the first place. Morning seeped in slowly, the kind of pale, gray morning that doesn't brighten anything, just reveals the things you were trying not to see. My phone vibrated somewhere near my elbow, but I ignored it. I already knew who it was. She'd been messaging me all night, missed calls, voice notes she probably regretted sending, heart, breaking apologies, threatening guilt trips, the same cycle she'd perfected over the years. I didn't listen to a single one. Instead, I opened my laptop again. This time, the brightness stabbed through the darkness of the room, making me blink away the sting. My cursor hovered over her messages on Facebook, those desperate paragraphs, those "please don't do this to me." Those "I made a mistake, but I still love you." Those "you win, I'm sorry." I stared at them until the words blurred together. Then I clicked mark as read. Not reply, not react, just acknowledge. That was enough. My tea had gone cold on the table, untouched, but I sipped it anyway. The bitterness suited the morning. As I sat there, I felt the tiniest shift inside me, like something long tangled had finally loosened. Not healed, not forgiven, just released. For the first time in years, her words didn't feel like hooks sinking into my ribs. They just felt like noise. I pushed my chair back and stretched, feeling the stiffness in my shoulders crack. My room was messy. Clothes on the bed, papers on the floor, a life I hadn't taken care of for a long time because I'd been too busy trying to carry the weight of someone else's chaos. But right then, none of it bothered me. What bothered me was the window. The curtains were closed, sealing me in this little cocoon of darkness. I hesitated for a moment, then walked toward them. It felt symbolic in a way, like every cliché moment in every cliché story, but I didn't care. My fingers gripped the fabric, and with one slow pull, I dragged the curtains open. Light flooded the room, not bright, not warm, just daylight, honest daylight, and seeing my room under it felt strange, almost unfamiliar. Like I'd stepped out from underwater and was breathing real air for the first time. I went back to my desk, opened a blank document, and began typing. Not a message to her, not a post, not revenge, just thoughts, raw, unfiltered thoughts about everything that had happened, everything she had taken, everything I had allowed. It wasn't about punishing her anymore. It was about understanding myself, about reclaiming the parts of me I had abandoned just to keep a drowning person afloat. Sentence after sentence poured out of me. Anger, grief, betrayal, relief, clarity. Every word felt like a small piece of weight I didn't have to carry anymore. By the time I stopped, the sun was finally breaking through the clouds outside. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. My chest felt lighter, not empty, just clearer, calm, even. I checked my phone one last time, more messages from her, more missed calls. I locked the screen without reading any of them. And for the first time in a long time, I felt done, not destroyed, not bitter, just done. It was over, and I was finally starting to feel like myself again. The day passed in a strange quiet, not peaceful, just quiet, like the world was holding its breath and waiting for me to realize something I hadn't quite reached yet. I moved around my house on autopilot, doing things without really thinking, washing my face, changing my clothes, opening the windows to let some air in. Each small action felt oddly new, like I was relearning how to exist in my own space without the ghost of her presence circling everything. By afternoon, I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the kettle as it heated water. The steam curled upward in soft white spirals. I watched them for too long, my mind drifting, not to her, just drifting. And it was strange, realizing her absence wasn't a gaping hole anymore, it was just silence, a silence I could finally live with. When the tea was ready, I took the cup to the balcony. The air outside carried late, evening chill, brushing against my skin with a kind of refreshing sharpness. I leaned on the railing and looked out at the neighborhood, cars moving lazily on the street, someone sweeping their driveway, kids kicking a half-flat football across the road, normal life, ordinary life. A life that had kept moving even when mine hadn't. I breathed in slowly, feeling something loosen in my chest again. That's when my phone buzzed. For a moment, instinct tightened my jaw. Old habits die slow, and part of me expected another long paragraph from her, another emotional plea disguised as sincerity. But when I looked down, it wasn't her. It was a close friend of mine. Bro, you good? You've been offline all day. I stared at the screen, the three-word message hitting harder than it should have. It wasn't a dramatic question. It wasn't emotional. It was just genuine, concern without manipulation, care without strings. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I typed back, yeah, just processing. Immediately he called. I almost didn't pick up. Some part of me wasn't ready to talk to anyone yet, but my thumb moved before my brain could protest. His voice came through, steady and familiar. Processing what? I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, letting go. I said simply. He didn't respond for a moment. Then he sighed softly. Finally, we talked for a few minutes. Nothing deep, nothing heavy. Just normal conversation, jokes, small updates, the kind of talk that reminds you you're still connected to the world. When the call ended, my chest felt lighter in a way that words couldn't explain. I stayed on the balcony long after that, watching the sky shift from pale orange to deep blue. A stray dog barked somewhere in the distance, and the breeze grew colder, but I didn't go inside. I liked the quiet. I liked the stillness. I liked the version of myself that existed in that moment. Quiet, tired, but honest. Her messages kept coming throughout the evening. I didn't open a single one. They lit up my phone screen again and again, each notification trying to drag me back into the story I'd finally closed. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I placed my phone face down on the table and wrapped my hands around my warm cup of tea. My fingers felt steady, grounded. It hit me slowly but surely. This was the first day in years that wasn't about her. The first day where my emotions weren't dictated by her mood, her apologies, her chaos. I had spent so long reacting to her that I'd forgotten what it felt like to simply be. As the night settled in fully, I whispered something to myself. Nothing poetic, nothing dramatic, just the truth spoken out loud for the first time. I'm done living in the ruins. The words hung in the air, solid and final, and for once, I believed them. The next morning arrived without warning. Just soft light slipping through the curtains, touching my face like it was trying to wake someone who hadn't rested in years. I blinked slowly, my eyes adjusting to the quiet brightness in the room. For a moment, I lay there staring at the ceiling, registering the strange stillness in my chest. No anxiety, no dread, no expectation of a message that would shake my mood. Just calm. It almost felt unnatural. I sat up in bed, stretching my arms, and listened to the silence. It didn't suffocate me anymore. It didn't feel like the pause before an argument or the calm before a storm. It felt like peace, awkward, unfamiliar peace, but peace nonetheless, I got out of bed and opened the window. Morning air rushed in, cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth from last night's light rain. The world outside looked washed clean. Roads darkened, leaves glistening, the sky soft and pale as if it had just woken up too. There was something symbolic about it. Or maybe I was just finally able to notice these things. I walked to the kitchen, made myself tea, and for once, it didn't feel like a distraction or a routine. It just felt like something I wanted to do. I stood by the counter, waiting for the kettle to boil, tapping my fingers on the cold marble. When the tea was ready, I sat near the living room window and took my first sip, warm, steadying, the kind that slowly spreads through your chest and tells your heartbeat to relax. My phone lay on the table beside me, screen dark and silent. I didn't rush to check it. I didn't feel the urge. I didn't need to. After about an hour of quiet morning, I finally picked it up, not out of fear or habit, but simply because I wanted to clear whatever was there. As expected, her messages had filled the night. Long paragraphs, voice notes, missed calls, apologies mixed with blame, confusion wrapped in desperation. It was the same cycle, the same familiar pattern. Except this time, the words didn't hit me. I scrolled through them with a blank expression, feeling nothing except a distant recognition of who I used to be, the version of me who would have been shaken, pulled in, manipulated back into her orbit. But that wasn't me anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened her chat settings and pressed mute. Not block, not delete, just mute. It wasn't about running away. It was about no longer letting her dictate the terms of my peace. My thumb lingered over the screen for a moment, as if acknowledging a quiet farewell. Then I placed the phone face down again and leaned back in my chair. That's when my neighbor knocked on the door, a simple, everyday knock. He wanted to borrow some tools, nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, but the moment felt important in a strange way. I handed him the toolbox, exchanged a small smile, and for the first time in a long time, I felt connected to the present. I wasn't drowning in memories. I wasn't stuck in a loop. I wasn't replaying old conversations in my head. I was just here, alive in my own life again. When he left, I stepped out onto the balcony. The morning sun had climbed higher now, warming my face. Cars moved lazily on the street below. Somewhere in the distance, a vendor shouted, selling fruits from his cart. Normal life, simple life, a life I finally felt part of again. I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply, feeling the air fill my lungs with something like hope. A quiet, steady kind of hope that didn't rush or demand anything. A small smile tugged at my lips. Maybe healing wasn't dramatic. Maybe it wasn't a sudden explosion of clarity. Maybe it was just this, a morning that didn't hurt, and for now, that was enough. By the time evening arrived, the day felt like a long exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. I moved through the apartment slowly, almost cautiously, as if I was afraid that peace was something fragile, something that might crack if I stepped too loudly. There was a softness in the air, a gentle quiet that didn't intimidate me anymore. It felt earned. I sat on the couch with my knees tucked under a blanket, scrolling mindlessly through videos while the last bit of daylight seeped through the blinds. The sky was turning that sleepy blue, purple color, the kind that always made me feel like the world was winding down without me needing to chase it. For once, I didn't feel behind. I didn't feel like I was missing out or losing control. I didn't feel like I owed anyone a response, an explanation, or a piece of myself. I just existed, and it was enough. After a while, I put my phone down and let my head rest against the cushion. My mind drifted back, not painfully this time, not sharply, but in an observational way. Like watching old footage of someone else's life, except that someone was me. All the memories of the shouting, the guilt, tripping, the tears, the manipulation. It used to feel like swallowing glass. Now it felt distant, muted, almost surreal. Like my brain was finally willing to file them away instead of forcing me to relive every second. Healing doesn't make the memories disappear. It just stops letting them control your breathing. At one point, I got up and walked to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. not scanning for damage, not analyzing every flaw or wondering if I deserved the things she put me through, just looking. And what I saw wasn't the same person who spent nights crying on the bathroom floor, or the one who tried to decode every mixed signal she threw at me, or the one who mistook chaos for connection. I saw someone tired, yes, but stronger, steadier, someone who finally understood their own worth, not in a loud, triumphant way, but quietly, confidently. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face, letting the chills snap me fully into the moment. When I looked back up, my reflection felt like an ally instead of an opponent. Later, I stepped out onto the balcony again. The night breeze wrapped around me, cool and calming. Streetlights flickered on, one by one, like someone gently revealing the world after dark. Car engines hummed in the distance, dogs barked a block away, and somewhere faintly, someone laughed. It was the soundtrack of life moving on, and for once, I didn't feel left behind. I leaned against the railing and took a slow, deep breath. The kind that fills your lungs all the way and releases something heavy on the way out. I didn't realize how many breaths I'd taken over the past months that were shallow, panicked, interrupted by anxiety. This one was whole, complete, mine. My phone buzzed inside. Probably another round of messages I had no intention of reading. I didn't even turn around to check. I just stayed there, letting the wind brush through my hair, feeling the weight of the world finally shift off my shoulders. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel like a character surviving someone else's story. I felt like the narrator of my own, someone who had woken up from a long, twisted dream and was relearning how to live in a world not defined by fear. I whispered to myself, quiet enough that only the night could hear it, I'm okay, not perfect, not healed overnight, just okay, and that small truth felt like the biggest victory I'd had in years. The next day felt different from the moment I opened my eyes, not lighter, just clearer, like the fog that used to fill my brain had thinned enough for me to finally see the outlines of my own life again. I didn't rush to check my phone. I didn't brace myself for emotional impact. I didn't have that tiny burst of panic that used to spark in my chest every time a notification chimed. Instead, I stayed in bed for a minute, staring at the ceiling, letting my mind settle into the quiet. My body felt heavier than usual, but not in a bad way. More like I was finally resting after running an emotional marathon for months. Eventually, I got up, wrapped myself in a blanket, and walked to the kitchen. The air was cool, still carrying a leftover chill from the night. I made breakfast slowly, almost ceremonially, taking my time cracking eggs, toasting bread, heating water for tea. Everything I did felt intentional, like I was relearning how to care for myself in ways I'd neglected. I ate by the window again, watching the sunlight spread across the floor. It felt grounding, simple, almost sacred, a reminder that the world kept turning even when my mind had been trapped in its own orbit. Halfway through breakfast, my phone buzzed from the coffee table, one vibration after another, then another. I recognized the rhythm of her persistence without even checking the screen, but I didn't move. I didn't rush toward it. I didn't freeze. I just let it ring out. For once, it didn't feel like a hook pulling me back. It felt like background noise, faint, unimportant. When it finally went silent, I exhaled and stood up, carrying my empty plate to the sink. My movements felt deliberate, almost therapeutic. Wash, rinse, dry, place on the rack, small, ordinary tasks that had stopped feeling ordinary for a long time. As I dried my hands, I caught sight of my reflection in the microwave door. Not entirely clear, just a distorted silhouette. But something about it made me pause. It hit me then. I had survived something I didn't fully understand until it was over. And the strangest part, I didn't hate her. I didn't miss her either. I just felt done explaining, done absorbing, done losing myself piece by piece. Around noon, I decided to finally check my phone. Not because I wanted to respond, but because I was ready to face whatever was waiting. The messages were long, emotional, spiraling, a mixture of apologies, defensiveness, guilt, and desperation. A familiar pattern, one I knew by heart, one that used to feel like gravity, but this time, the words didn't stir anything inside me. They didn't reopen wounds, they didn't twist my thoughts or make me question myself. They just looked like what they truly were, the final echoes of something broken. I scrolled through them slowly, reading every line, not out of obligation, but for closure. When I reached the end, I set the phone down and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I walked to the doorway leading to the balcony, but didn't step out. I just stood there, looking out at the world I'd ignored for so long. Cars passed, birds darted across the sky, life moved, and for the first time, I felt like I was ready to move with it. I whispered into the empty room, not bitter, not angry, just truthful. This chapter is over, not dramatic. Not loud, just final. I turned around, walked back inside, and began cleaning my apartments, slowly reorganizing the physical space to match the emotional one I was rebuilding. Every item I put away, every surface I wiped down, felt like reclaiming something. My time, my boundaries, my peace, myself. The story wasn't about her anymore. It was finally about me. I didn't notice how long I'd been cleaning until the sun had shifted across the room, turning the walls a soft golden color. I stood there, wiping down a shelf, when I suddenly realized something that made me pause. I wasn't cleaning to distract myself. I wasn't moving to avoid my thoughts. I wasn't trying to stay busy to outrun the ache. I was simply living. Each movement felt like a small declaration. I'm here, I'm present, I'm rebuilding. I put the cloth down and looked around the room. It was the same apartment I'd been in for months, the same floors, the same walls, the same furniture, but it felt different. Brighter somehow, less like a cage and more like a place I belonged again. Isn't it strange how the space stays the same, and yet the moment you reclaim it, it feels like it breathes differently? Eventually, I drifted toward the bedroom. My knees cracked softly as I sat on the edge of the bed. I ran my hand across the comforter, feeling the familiar texture beneath my fingertips. It reminded me of the nights I'd spent curled up here, crying into my pillow, trying to piece together what I did wrong. It felt like a lifetime ago. I reached over to the nightstand and opened the drawer. Inside were old receipts, a tangled pair of headphones, a dry, doubt pen, and a long, forgotten notebook I used to write in. I pulled it out, brushing away a thin layer of dust. The first page I flipped to had handwriting so shaky and messy, it barely looked like mine. Words written from a place of confusion, fear, and shame. I feel like I'm losing myself, but I don't know how to stop. Reading it now didn't hurt. It didn't sting. It just felt like looking at an old wound that finally scarred over proof of survival, not weakness. I closed the notebook gently, almost respectfully, and placed it back inside the drawer, not as something to hide, but as something I'd outgrown. After a moment, I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The city was alive in a quiet way, the kind of weekday afternoon where people moved slowly, deliberately. A woman walked her dog across the street. A kid rode past on a bicycle, wobbling slightly. Two neighbors chatted beside a car, laughing softly. The world wasn't waiting for me to heal, it just kept going, and now I felt ready to go with it. I took a deep breath and reached for my phone. There were no new messages this time, just the previous unanswered ones sitting in the chat window. I scrolled through them one last time, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to make peace with the ending. Then I pressed archive, and not delete, not block, just put away a gentle goodbye. I placed the phone face down on the table and walked into the living room. The air felt lighter now, fresher. I opened the windows fully, letting the breeze sweep through the apartment, carrying away the stale heaviness that had lingered for months. For the first time in a long time, I felt a natural urge rise inside me. An urge to go outside, not to escape, not to run, but simply to step into the world as myself. I grabbed my keys, slipped on my shoes, and opened the front door. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. I locked the door behind me and stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. Not anxiety, not fear, just readiness. I walked down the stairs slowly, each step a small victory. When I pushed open the building's front door and stepped outside, the sunlight touched my skin warmly, like a welcome back. The air tasted different, cleaner, cooler, real. And for the first time in so long, I felt like I wasn't returning to a life that had been falling apart. I was stepping into a new one, mine.